Hello, my spooky angels. It's me, Lord Nicolina, or should I say, Misunderstood Nicolina. And welcome to the first ever Halloween-themed episode of Angel Rise. Now, why did I go with the name Misunderstood Nicolina? As it turns out, this is the name I came up with for the demonic version of myself. And no, it's not Nicolina. It's me, Nicolina, turned into a demon. I made this name because of the misunderstanding I see in the world. I first made reference of this in episode 17 of Angel Rise, which I will share a link to on the screen. Now, on to the task at hand. I figured, since it's Halloween season, I thought I would not only change my channel name, but this won't be the only Halloween-themed episode of Angel Rise you all are getting this year. And you heard that right. I will be making a second episode, which I will release next week, around the time I'm recording this, themed around Halloween. And plus, Halloween is one of my favorite times of the year, so I feel it's only fitting. So without further ado, let's get into this episode's topic. For the first ever Halloween-themed episode of Angel Rise, I will be talking about times where I was scared so badly and unexpectedly. I would like you all to keep in mind that these things I'm going to talk about, I'm not necessarily afraid of. More or less, they're in this case, I would like to call them temporary fears. If you would like to see the episode where I talk about my actual fears, I will share a link to that on the screen right here. First off, I'm going to talk about 2 occasions where I was chased by dogs. One of them was actually good, and the other one, not so much. I say that because, well, even though both of them scare me, they both had different outcomes. The first occasion was in 2016, and I was starting my grade 10 year of high school. On that day, I was walking up to school from my father's place because my mother was watching over my step-cousins while their father was away on a fishing trip. And plus, my father's house is not far away from the high school that I went to. The route I took on that day included a bridge that goes over a set of train tracks. The moment I made the turn to go on the bridge, I heard barking from a small dog. I was definitely startled by that. Then I turn around and see it running towards me. And honestly, I was so terrified, but not on a big level. As it got closer to me, I held out the coat I was wearing that day to hopefully stop the dog from getting to me. I was nearing the middle of the bridge when the dog's owner, which looked like an elderly woman, came out of the house that was closest to the train tracks and called her dog back. It was definitely a relief, and I couldn't be more thankful for that. Afterwards, the woman and I had some small talk, and then I went on my way. No harm, no foul. Looking back on it, this doesn't scare me as much anymore, because the dog was pretty small, and it didn't run that quick. So overall, I feel I wasn't in any real danger on that day, apart from potentially falling off the bridge. But still, I was okay. The second time this happened, however, really leaves me on edge whenever I go on walks nowadays. This happened about 2 weeks before my mother and I were due to move to my grandparents' place. I was going for a walk to the end of the road on the street my mother and I lived on at the time. And right at the end, there's this really nice brick house that I honestly think is one of the best houses I've ever seen. On the outside, at least. On that day, I was taking a moment at the end of the street before I turned around and headed back to my mother's place when I heard a dog barking. This time, the dog was much bigger and it was sprinting towards me. My heart started racing like crazy at the sight. And I have to say, I swore at the top of my lungs. Probably the loudest I've ever screamed in my life. That time, I felt in real danger of being attacked. Thankfully, just before the dog crossed the tree line, their owner came out of the brick house and called the dog back. If the first time this happened was a relief, I felt this time was more so. The owner, which was this time a man, did say to me that their dog was harmless, and I'm honestly unsure if he apologized or not. Regardless, I was left stunned and shaken almost the whole walk home. I honestly have never been scared of dogs in my life. Heck, I was even a big dog person when I was really young. But after what happened, I couldn't have been more wise to be extra cautious around them, especially when I walk. Because I don't know when this could happen again. So my word of advice for anyone that owns a dog, please make sure you keep your eyes on them at all times, and make sure they're under control. And to those who take walks, especially in neighborhoods, always have your guard up, 'cause something like this could happen to you too. The next thing I'm going to talk about that gave me a real fright was the creature under the bed from the Disney movie The Nightmare Before Christmas. For those of you who don't know, The Nightmare Before Christmas is no doubt one of my favorite movies of all time. But the moment where the creature under the bed appears scared the living wits out of me when I was really young. I won't spoil the scene for those of you who haven't seen the movie, but I will give you a hint as to when it happens. The creature appears at the beginning part of the film during the opening song, but I'm not saying when in the opening song. The reason this character scared me so bad when I was a child was because, no doubt, the way it looked. And around the time, of course, I didn't understand horror as much back then as I do now. And looking back on it, the creature kind of looks like Nick Helena when she's in his aggressive mode. That being the red eyes and the sharp teeth. Because of this, I would avoid watching that part of the film since it scared me so bad. But as I've gotten older, I've grown to appreciate the character more and watch the part where it appears, as I've become more accepting of the horror genre. Thank you, Tim Burton, for giving me such a good fright as a kid. And for a wonderful movie as well. The next thing I'm going to talk about that gives me an unexpected scare, and this one may sound ridiculous, is when my mother talks to me whenever I wear my headphones and I'm listening to something. It's a recent thing that's been happening, and my mother does it quite a bit. And almost every time, I get caught off guard. And this happens usually before she goes to bed. And why does this scare me? This scares me because I'm so tuned into what I'm either watching or listening to that I'm not aware of anyone else around me, especially my mother. And don't get me wrong, I love my mother to pieces. But she can be quite the one to pull a few scares on me, even if they're not intentional. This is why I always like to keep the volume on my headphones at a reasonable level, so I can always listen for anything, especially when my mother tells me when she's going to bed. Now, for those of you who are fans of the game Bendy and the Ink Machine, I'm sure the next thing I got an unexpected scare from I'm going to talk about you may have experienced as well. During a time I was playing the game, around Valentine's Day 2019, I was exploring an area in either chapters 3 or 4 when I turned around to adjust my character. Right then and there, the deformed version of Bendy was right there, and there was nothing I could do but get an absolute fright out of it as I was killed. And plus, I was also somewhat close to completing an area within the chapter I was in, which made me partially angry at the same time. That wasn't even the scariest part though. The chase theme didn't play, nor a warning of his presence. He just appeared right then and there, ready to scare the living daylights out of me. Oh my god. And don't get me wrong, the deformed version of Bendy gets me every time, whenever he makes his presence known. But that one time on Valentine's Day in 2019 was no doubt the biggest of them all. Speaking of unexpected sights, the next thing I'm going to talk about is something that continuously happened when my mother and I were living at the house we previously lived at. Times when I was sitting in the living room on the couch, doing whatever I was doing, I would look out of the corner of my eye and see what looked like a strange black figure walking on our front walkway. That made me quite paranoid, to be honest. And I thought to myself, who on earth would be walking up to our place at random times during the day? Little did I know, it was just a garden decoration that was spinning that caused that illusion. Out of all things, it had to be that. To be exact, that decoration was shaped like a flower and had rotating petals, which gave it the illusion that someone was walking on the walkway. But if someone was actually on the walkway, I would have heard footsteps on there. But thank God I didn't those many times. Darn you, flower decoration, for making me believe you were a real person. The last unexpected scare I got that I'm going to talk about happened around the time the pandemic begun. This was also around the time I began watching EAS scenarios on YouTube. I came across a scenario called The Entities, made by a YouTuber by the name of Scorpion Punch. And I found it interesting, so I gave it a watch. Little did I know, that scenario would give me a fright I would never forget. Now, contrary to what I've seen in other EAS scenarios, which have no jump scares or very little jump scares, this one had plenty to offer. And that's what got me the most. The following 3 scares are the ones that got me the most. First, the Jersey Devil scene. When the person in the scene attempts to get away, they crash and come across the Jersey Devil itself. But the car screeches got me more than the Jersey Devil jump scare. And I said exactly the text that appeared on the screen. That makes it even more scary for me. Holy. The second one was during an alert that shared that the entities were of one big paranormal entity. And nearing the end, the line, "be destroyed," which implied that the source of the entities must be destroyed, began repeating itself. And I knew right then and there it was representing a glitch. And the loud noise that followed, let me tell you guys, I wailed like a child at that. Oh my god. It honestly scared me so bad. And lastly, the scene where the United States President gets killed by one of these entities. And afterwards, a backwards voice clip of a scary girl played, which I believed was of her singing a nursery rhyme. That honestly had me on edge. So much to the point where I thought there was going to be another jump scare. Thankfully, however, there wasn't. And without question, I'm not denying the fact that all I've talked about here really put a big scare into me. So much, you can definitely say I was scared to the heavens. That's all for episode 22, and the first ever Halloween-themed episode of Angel Rise. Like I mentioned at the beginning, while I did get scared by the things I mentioned, I don't classify them as actual fears in my life. I classify them as temporary fears. But I do understand that scares or fears like those can keep our eyes and minds more open to our surroundings. If you enjoyed this episode, definitely feel free to leave a like and share this with your loved ones. Spread the word! For those of you who are new and would like to join this journey of mine, then please feel free to subscribe to join the blue and white Angel Brethren today, and click on the notification bell so that you are notified whenever I release new content. And check out my other videos too. With that being said, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a great day or night whenever you are watching this. And until we meet again, my name is Lord Nicolina, or for the month of October, Misunderstood Nicolina. Be strong, stay positive, and God bless.